For Sunday, December 11th, you found the Georgia Gang. Topping our agenda today, water wars again in the news in Georgia. There might be a fight over school choice in the General Assembly. And in Gwinnett County, how about voting in Spanish? Some of the stories up for grabs on the Georgia Gang.
From the Fox 5 studios, the Georgia Gang starts now.
Good morning. We're glad you'll be with us on this chilly Sunday. We're going to begin with the water rulings that we have said. We insist you accept this. It's going to be the most important news of the coming few months. A ruling this week from the Army Corps of Engineers, which, while new, restates a position. Am I saying this right? That Metro Atlanta, Jeff, can get all the water it needs from Lake Lanier and the Buford Dam until the year 2050?
Until the year 2050, yeah. And
Except that
we've had this trial taking place on the west coast or somewhere out there.
No, East Coast.
East Coast, Maine.
Maine.
Is that where it was?
Yeah.
Maine. Portland, Maine, not Portland, Oregon.
Oh, I thought it was Portland, Oregon all this
Portland,
time.
Maine.
It was Portland, Maine.
Portland, Maine.
In any event, a special master appointed by the U.S. Supreme Court who's going to make a ruling probably by Christmas in the lawsuit between Florida and Georgia over water flowing into the state south of us. And that is going to make, obviously, a much bigger impact than the Army Corps of Engineers
But I guess what I'm asking is this, and Phil, maybe you know the answer. This is the Army Corps of Engineers making this decision. Okay, Georgia gets all this, Metro Atlanta gets all the water it needs. Okay, and in Congress, there's a bill that basically says that too. But the lawsuit trumps all. Is that the idea?
Maybe. The special master that Jeff is referring to has said, I may agree with parts of Georgia's argument to keep its water and not cap it. I may partially agree with Florida. I may do whatever. But to go back to your point, the Army Corps of Engineers, you're pointing out, they have a manual and you have to follow these guidelines. And that was good news that we got last week because the Army Corps has made a decision. And generally, one of the arguments of Georgia is, in a lot of arguments by a lot of states, is states and localities ought to have control over the water, not the courts. And if we're told, Jeff, that, as you know, if we can work this out, so much the better with Florida. So I actually am optimistic with both of these issues, Dick, with the Army Corps giving us a green light, which will be hard to overturn, and then whatever we hear from Portland,
exactly
Maine,
right,
and then it goes to the Supreme Court.
I think we may get a favorable ruling from the special master.
Georgia has a great argument, and the U.S. Supreme Court will probably hear it in February.
And Florida really didn't make its case that whatever's going on in the Apalachicola Bay, and their oyster industry is not necessarily a direct result of lower water flows from Georgia.
Right, they can't prove harm.
Right.
Now,
Well, they couldn't prove it to the exclusion of other natural causes like drought and overfishing by the industry. So
fair enough. Now, I'm going to stay right there with you, Alexis. We don't do crime on this broadcast. It's not part of our bailiwick, but I think there is a broader question to what happened in Southwest Georgia earlier this week, where two policemen for Georgia Southwestern University were shot in the head and killed. One hung on for 24 hours. And Alexis, it is a very disturbing trend. We spent way too much time on this broadcast discussing Black Lives Matter versus All Lives Matter. We're divided on that.
And versus Blue Lives Matter.
And we never really mentioned Blue Lives Matter, thank you, but they do. And there's a 66% increase in shootings at police in the country this year. That's scary, 66%. What's driving that?
I don't know. It is very disturbing. I think part of it may be the result of the fact that we have citizen reporters now who are videotaping a lot of the violence that's happening, particularly with the beginning that gave rise to the Black Lives Matter movement. Many of them, the protest was about shooting unarmed black victims by
You think
police.
that makes other blacks more eager to shoot policemen?
It does not. It stirs the pot, if you will. It just creates an environment of fear and hostility on all sides.
Well, I think they're unconnected. I think that you're seeing a lot of this violence, whether it's street violence, gang violence, violence against the police or whomever, because of proliferation of guns. It's easy and convenient to be able to shoot somebody in our society today. You can easily get a gun. It doesn't matter where you live. You can live in a city where they've got tough gun laws, and all you got to do is cross the border, go get a gun.
This guy was a career criminal. The shooter who took his own life was a career criminal.
Right. Exactly right.
If they took away your law-abiding guns, he would still have a gun. So I'm not going to buy the gun argument here.
Well, if they're everywhere, and they are in our society, and we look at other societies around the world where you don't have this kind of access to firearms, and they don't have these kinds of violent crime rates or murder rates, why can't Americans put two and two together and say that we have all this violence because we have all these weapons?
All right, Phil, make your point, then I'm going to land on him.
Let's put that argument away for today. We can talk about that another time. We talk about it all the time. I think we all agree that over the last 4 to 6 years, and the federal statistics are there, gangs have really increased, to your point. Why is this happening? The gang culture is growing, not just in the urban areas, but in the rural areas. You talk to anyone here in Georgia, any law enforcement person, or you go up to Detroit, your old hometown, and I don't care, you know, outlaws are going to get guns anyway, as we all know. So that argument aside, we have got to deal as an administration and as a state in going after gang prosecutions. They're heavily armed, and they're going after the police.
And we also need to have a culture of greater respect. And I think the discourse that happened during this recent presidential campaign was so disrespectful.
Are you talking about when Hillary Clinton embraced a cop killer at the Democrat National
Convention?
No,
I'm talking about the way they attacked each other personally and viciously.
Well, when you see Hillary Clinton, the Democrat nominee, praising a cop killer at their party convention, that should upset everybody of any political stripe. I agree with you on respect, but don't embrace cop killers.
Well, and I want to make a last point on this. Let me make a last point. The President-elect this week met with Mayor Rahm Emanuel of Chicago. Donald Trump and Rahm together. That must have been some meeting, because they have absolutely nothing in common.
Right.
Nothing.
Why would they do it?
But according to press accounts, they met to discuss Mayor Emanuel's desire to keep Chicago a sanctuary city. Why didn't they discuss Chicago's 701 homicides this year as of last week, or the 4,050 people shot in that city?
Well, they may have.
That's the point. I hope they did.
They may have.
But that's the point I'm getting at.
Maybe because
this shooter in Southwest Georgia, if he'd seen the video of the guy in South Carolina getting shot in the back by the policeman and then emerged from a mistrial, then he might be angry. Yeah. But he was just a career criminal who decided to kill 2 cops who busted up a domestic disturbance. This is not good stuff.
No, it's not.
Well, no, and unfortunately, the murder rate is up around the country. It's up in Atlanta and some other cities. And I'll go back to your point, though, on respect. I think we can agree with that. I think politicians of all stripes need to support law enforcement. Are there abuses in law enforcement? Yes, but there is a system to deal with that. They need to support law
enforcement, but they also need to recognize when law enforcement has gone.
It's respect. It's also being a law-abiding citizen. I mean, but if I'm a police officer working in the state of Georgia in America, where those guys were, I have got to fear for my life all the time. Why? Because under the state law, under state statute, I can have a gun on me anytime. I can have it in my glove box. I can have it under my seat. Legally, I don't need a license to carry in the state of Georgia. That means that every time a police officer stops a motorist, he is looking at a potential shooter.
Do you realize that a lot of times an armed citizen has saved police officers and has saved various people? So there's 2 sides to that coin.
Very rare.
All right, we got to get out. We got to get out. When we come back, we're going to talk about 2 very interesting rulings from the Supreme Court of Georgia this week. And those Spanish ballots in Gwinnett County are coming up. Stay with us.
Have a question or comment for the Georgia Gang? Visit their website at fox5atlanta.com.
We've got a lot to cover. I've got to move on. Let's go to the Supreme Court of Georgia, resolving an issue that has troubled the Speaker, David Ralston. And the High Court of the state of Georgia agreed to his public reprimand on a client's escrow account?
That's right.
Is there much more to be said about that?
There's not much more to be said. A special master came up with that decision. It was ratified, and that's, in fact, the Speaker's exemplary public service was pointed out as a way that why it was a minor reprimand. So we move on.
All right, and Burl Ellis, the Supreme Court ruled that Burl Ellis, whose convictions were overturned just a week ago, Supreme Court ruled that he could regain his law license. So now Burl Ellis can go back to work in his chosen profession, but I wouldn't want to have to face his legal bills, Jeff.
No, he's gonna have some serious legal bills. There's no question about that. But he gets on with his life, and he gets an exoneration that I think was overdue. And I think that we all on this panel agree with that. That he was overcharged and charged and tried too many times. And all we can hope for is that there won't be a third time.
All right.
Yes,
now the
absolutely.
legislature met up in Athens. You usually go to that, don't you?
I missed
Did
it
you go?
this time.
You missed it.
I missed
okay.
it this time.
They meet every 2 years up in Athens for a 2 or 3 day sort of meet and greet and look ahead
Orient
to what
the
they're
new
doing.
members.
And orient the new members, that's right. And it's interesting the issues that are popping up. Number one is school choice to get around the voters' rejection of Constitutional Amendment 1. And I think the governor is going to press that hard, that students in non-performing schools be allowed, in fact, encouraged to transfer out of those schools into schools that do perform.
That was the talk in Athens last week, and it's called Plan B, as we've all talked about, because the Opportunity School District failed on the November 8th ballot. What we're talking about is maybe trying to give more power, where I believe it should be, to the State Board of Education. Under current law, if there are so-called failing schools, then a parent, to your point on choice, a parent can try to get their child transferred to a better school and get them out of
a school that has room.
A school that has room. That's going to be what the legislation, it hasn't been fully formulated. That's what it's going to try to be about, to try to help parents get their children out of the trap of a failing school.
Well, the problem with that, though, is that the parent has to provide the transportation from
That
the
is the
school
big
that's
issue.
in the neighborhood
That is the big
to
issue.
the other school.
That's right.
So I don't see that as being a real viable alternative. But the other thing I think that they're looking at that was reported is funding formula and looking at providing more funds for the lower income.
Reworking the whole thing. You
Yeah.
know, the QBE, the current law, was passed in 1983.
Yeah,
a long time
Which
since
was
we
a revision
revisited
of
it. And the Governor
1974.
Deals, promised he was going to take a look at that. Let's turn to home. Let's start at downtown Atlanta, if we might. What seems to me to be a minor thing is getting some liberals very upset, and that is the purchasers of Underground Atlanta, a firm from South Carolina, want to make that a kind of a center city, livable, walkable, shoppable mall, restaurant, and all. And they want to close a couple of streets to do that. And the liberals are going crazy over this. And I thought liberals wanted walkable urban environments and be able to shop and ride a bike and all that. What's wrong with closing streets to accommodate something in the very center of the old downtown that could bring that back?
Well, it's not a matter of closing streets. It's these streets are being abandoned by the city of Atlanta and privatized by the firm that's going to redevelop Underground Atlanta, in much the way that you have private streets in, say, Atlantic Station, and it gives them the opportunity to really fashion these streets in the way that they would like to be able to do. They're responsible for them. They're going to have to maintain them. They're going to have to provide lighting and other amenities for those streets.
What's wrong with that?
Well, there's nothing wrong with it, of course, because it's going to integrate the entire area.
Maria Saporta says it's awful. Bill Torpey says it's awful.
Well,
you think it's the end of the world.
You know, I think that
These liberals still don't know there was an election.
Oh boy. Well, I think that it sort of depends on how it's going to be done. You know, it may be a good thing, but it also may just cut off access to some.
It's going to be able. Look, let's be blunt about what it's all about. They want to get the bums and the homeless off those streets, because Underground Atlanta has been plagued by that for the last 40 years in various incarnations.
I don't think that that's.
They
I
got
don't think that that's the
that's not
objective.
true
I don't
either.
think that's the objective at all. I think that probably, to the extent that you're able to redevelop the area, you're going to get in a sort of a new infusion of folks in there, probably students, right?
Right.
And others from Georgia State University. And so I don't think that it's just about
Well,
bums
I
and
think
homeless.
you're both right.
still going to have.
I think he's right,
You're
though,
still
too.
going to have. You're still going to have 5 points there in the 5 Points MARTA station, and there are a lot of people who are transit dependent, and they're going to continue to use that transit station.
All you have to do,
No,
though,
no,
is
don't
enforce.
they use
you have
the
to-
streetcar?
You have to enforce the panhandling laws.
Yes.
If you would do that, I think you both would have a good argument. I think one of the big issues, I don't have a problem with the way that was structured, but I think you needed more transparency. And I think we all are in favor
Well-
of transparency in government. There was virtually no public input. I think the deal looked pretty good from what I read.
Yeah.
And I do agree with your
Yeah,
points.
the mayor rammed it down council's throat real
I think,
quickly.
but I think the public generally would have probably supported the idea.
And one last thought on this segment. The mayor also named Roosevelt Council the permanent airport director. That's a big job. And settled the lawsuit. Well, I don't think it was a lawsuit
No,
ever
it
filed.
was
No.
Settled the
It
proceedings
was
with
a
Miguel
dispute.
Southwell,
Yeah, exactly
whom he had
right.
fired as airport director. We just note that for the record.
This new director is going to be in the hot seat because the mayor wants these sweetheart contracts, and he better produce. And that was
What
why
sweetheart contracts
Southwell
are you
left.
talking about? That's absurd.
Have you
That's
ever
just
heard of?
crazy.
Have you ever heard of the advertising contract where the city?
I don't think you.
Oh,
for
you know
one
exactly
thing, the
what I'm talking
advertising
about.
contract
Yeah.
predated Kasim Reed,
And you know what?
and he was the one who had to settle it and fix
We
it.
gotta
I could
get out.
give you chapter and verse. I could give you
Jeez,
chapter
what are
and
you
verse.
talking about?
Let's
Oh,
not
man.
do it now.
Well, the first,
Yeah, all right.
I'll tell
Done it
you
for
what.
30
Save that
years.
The new
chapter.
U.S.
Save
attorney is
that
going to look at
verse.
those contracts. You can
Well,
mark my words.
you know, lots of U.S. attorneys have looked at those contracts and they've gone absolutely nowhere.
No, they haven't.
Because there are some minority folks who are successful at
Gotta
the
get out.
airport, means that folks like you want to knock it.
All right, got to get out. Habla Espanol? Well, you can vote no or you can vote C. We're going to explain that to you in a minute.
Have a question or comment for the Georgia Gang? Visit their website at fox5atlanta.com.
The Voting Rights Act of 1964 was one of America's proudest achievements and should have been. It guaranteed that every American had the right to vote. But the act as written and as it has evolved over the years has become really a shocker. For example, Gwinnett County now may be asked by the federal government to print its ballots and all its collateral materials in Spanish. I find that outrageous. This is America. The national language is English.
We have a national language?
No, we
No,
don't
we
have a
don't.
national
Is that in the
language.
Constitution?
No, it isn't.
No.
I didn't think so because I read it and I didn't see
Well, do you
that
want to vote
anywhere.
Urdu? You want to
Well,
vote what do you want?
let me just speak. There is no official language of the United States. There is one. There is one, however, in 32 states, including Georgia. That was an amendment of the Voting Rights Act. Later, it was, I think, very ill-conceived. In terms of Gwinnett County, if you hit 5% in a certain jurisdiction, you have to have foreign language ballots. That could get out of control. You know, there's 500 languages spoken in this country. Here's the point. You have to be proficient in English by federal law to be a U.S. citizen.
Correct.
And so why do we have to have this?
That's well
and
said.
I think under the new administration, this is going to be revisited. We love the Voting Rights Act, but this is an amendment that never should have gotten on
Jeff,
there.
in DeKalb County, there was a runoff this week for the commission. The county's officials are now all set. A fellow named Greg Adams, one in the super district that runs north and south, and he will join the new chairman, Michael Thurmond, and others.
Yes.
I think it's a pretty good commission.
Right.
It is a very
Four
good,
new members
that's
in the
yes,
last 2 years.
In the last couple of years, that's exactly right. So it's a new commission. It's a new day for the DeKalb County government. I was talking to a columnist the other day, and he said, "What am I going to write about? I mean, it's going to have this nice reform government in DeKalb County," and that's true. It's going to cut down on a lot of those negative stories, and I think a lot of the negative
I know, but
controversy that's taken place over the last couple of years.
Whoever that reporter is can just amble on over to the school board, because that's going to be a mess. You wait. This fight coming over redistricting in DeKalb is going to. It's not. I'm not alleging any corruption or anything like that.
No, I understand.
But it's going to be.
Yeah, but yes,
there's going
to be a strong reform government. We've seen Michael Thurmond do this many times, whether it was at DFACS 25 years ago, Department of Labor, the school system in DeKalb County. He helped stabilize that, and I think that he's going to bring that same integrity and accountability to DeKalb County.
Let's turn to politics. We could talk about Mike Boyce canceling his gala in Cobb County. We could talk about Victor Hill making Shaquille O'Neal a deputy sheriff. But let's get to some important stuff, like the 6th Congressional District. Jan Jones, the Speaker of the House Pro Tem, says she will not run for Tom Price's congressional seat.
Well, that's right. I think you're going to get some maybe new candidates coming in here. There will be a special election since Congressman Price has been tapped by President-elect Trump to run the Health and Human Services Department. You'll probably, special elections, as we all know, are tricky. And it's a different model than a general election. You're probably going to get from DeKalb County former State Senator Dan Moody, who can self-fund, and anyone, as we know, who self-funds can be an important factor. You just have to get into that runoff, and there will be a runoff. I believe you'll see Karen Handel, the former Secretary of State, announcing we're looking at Brandon Beach.
Rusty Paul, the mayor of Sandy Springs.
I'm not so sure that the mayor of Sandy Springs is going to do it. He may. I'd be surprised. And keep an eye out for Judson Hill, the state senator from Cobb County, announced as we saw.
Yeah.
And a Democrat jumped in, believe it or not. A former state senator named Ron Slotin
That's exactly
That's
right.
has jumped in.
Yeah.
And good luck to Ron.
Be interesting
It
to
is
see.
probably the most Republican district around. And now, where are we with Donald Trump? Oh, wait, something for our side. Henry County, Phil.
Well, that's right. Let's talk a little bit about that. You know, the Democratic Party has been talking about diversity and how they can turn, the African Americans with the demographic changes. But the new Henry County.
Party?
Yeah, thank you. The new
Yeah.
commission chairman in Henry County is a black Republican and campaigned on a platform of private enterprise and business development, sounded like us. And there's a new mayor of Stockbridge, too, a Republican.
Is she a Republican?
She's a Republican and won again on a conservative platform. So this business of Henry County turning Democrat seems a little premature.
Well, it was a surprise. You're right.
Yeah.
You're right. Now, let's go to Donald Trump. Excuse me, a frog in my throat. Is that an ethnic slur?
I think you're okay.
Frog in my throat? Okay.
I have no idea what that
That's
means.
a species slur. I mean,
Well, I'm not habling Spanish. I'm speaking French. No. So, Donald Trump is confounding everyone.
Yes.
It is amazing to me. He's actually doing what he said he was going to do, Phil. He's appointing people who know stuff to jobs they can handle. Like Terry Branstad, the governor of Iowa, is going to go to be the ambassador to China because he knows the Chinese president.
I think these are highly qualified individuals. He's talking with some Democrats, Republicans of different stripes. I think he's got people that even Democrats in the Senate, where they have to be confirmed, they're saying, well, okay, these people are qualified. We may not agree with them. So I think he's off to a good start.
The guy from Homeland is actually an immigration and refugee expert.
Right.
This is all new stuff.
Right. Yeah.
There's no cronyism here. I don't see buddies being appointed. I mean, I don't think
Just
Trump
because he doesn't
has
know
cronies,
anybody.
does he?
He doesn't know any politicians.
Well, he knows a lot of people. I think even you would have to admit these are qualified people.
Well, I think he's leaning on Vice President Pence, and he's delivering the people that share his
Well, this is not like the
ideology.
sainted
And-
Jack Kennedy naming his brother to be Attorney General.
No, it's not the same.
Well, he's like any good CEO or businessman. He's got several people in mind, and he's interviewing them and weighing the pros and cons. I think it's good.
And he also says he speaks to the current president, on a regular basis.
I think that's a good thing.
All right,
I
we got to
think he
get
gets
out.
advice from all over.
We got to get out. When we come back, and this week I really mean it, we're going to do winners and losers. Stay with us.
Time now for the week's winners and losers.
And we're going to be tight for time, so Jeffrey, go ahead.
well, I guess the winner is Twitter. The loser is the people tweeting, particularly the president-elect, taking shots, for instance, at a union leader in Indiana, really some union local, and he's tweeting about him. This is a president-elect of the United States. This is uncalled for. This is insane. Or the tweet, I think a week or two ago that we didn't get to discuss, that if you burn a flag, you get to lose your citizenship. Really? Has this guy read the Constitution? So let's do away with tweeting presidents. Can we do that?
Actually, I'll back you on that. I'd rather he be doing other things.
I don't know what it has to do with the Constitution. It's called free speech. It's a new social media
Right.
era. This is the 21st century now.
Man, what has to do with the
Alexis,
Constitution
winners
whether or
and
not you've
losers.
actually read it?
Okay.
Speak quickly.
Yes, okay. Diane McLaren and Katarina Taylor of the DeKalb Chamber put on a great legislative preview session this week in DeKalb County with several of the DeKalb legislators present and talking about what's coming up on the session. Kenny Leon directed Hairspray, which was presented live on national TV. And then Susan Cook and Karshik Sims Alvarado at Georgia State presented their honors program on Alonzo Herndon and the Atlanta Life contribution to the civil rights movement in Atlanta with their honors students.
All right, Phil.
I've got one leading Atlanta businessman we lost last week at age 88. It was Ed Noble. He had an incredible run, CEO of Noble Properties. At age 28 in 1959, he developed one of the first regional malls in the United States, Lenox Mall.
Yeah, and he also was an expert in petroleum business and synthetic fuels and an architect of the Georgia Republican Party. Let's not forget that from Ed Noble. We should also acknowledge the death of John Glenn at 95, a true American hero, the great astronaut. I'm worried about the Atlanta Hawks. They had dropped 10 of 12 through Friday, and their beautiful passing game is not existent. It's a problem we'll watch going forward for the Hawks. We'll see you next week on the Georgia Gang.
The opinions expressed in this broadcast are those of the panelists appearing in this program.